Christmas Star. Audio excerpt read by the author. Let justice be done though thy heavens fall. Latin legal adage. I'd like to shake every one of the grand jurors' hands because they know this mother and father couldn't have hurt their child. Shirley Brady, former housekeeper. I thought JonBenet was going to be there. I thought they found her, so I came in excited, almost relieved. Burke Ramsey. Chapter 1. We'll cooperate. How can I begin anything new with all of yesterday in me? Leonard Cohen, Beautiful Losers. On January 1st, 1997, John Ramsey was in Atlanta, sitting down for an interview on CNN. His wife Patsy was beside him. The host, Brian Cabell, asked the grieving father from Colorado,
"When you return to Boulder, you will sit down with the Boulder police?"
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want them to know everything possible.
Everything.
That can help them.
Whatever they want, whatever anyone wants, we will cooperate.
3 years and 2 months later, on March 27th, 2000, the Ramseys were back on CNN toting their new book, The Death of Innocence, in a 2-part interview over 2 days on Larry King Live. Larry's first question to the Ramseys was on something he described as directly current, the question of a polygraph test. More than 3 years after JonBenet's death, the Ramseys still hadn't taken one. Just 10 days earlier on Barbara Walters' show, John made the dubious claim that the cops had never actually asked them to take a lie detector test. Walters had seized on this whopper and asked the couple if they would take a polygraph now. Both said they would. It was a strange situation all round. While the Ramseys were promoting their book in the media, the same media giving them airplay and PR was asking them about taking a lie detector test. But now it was Larry's turn to hammer the Ramseys on the same point. So when he opened his show, he opened on precisely this point.
You had said recently in an interview that you were willing to take a lie detector test, and apparently the Boulder police are now saying, let's set it up. Will you do it?
We were asked, had we been asked to take a lie detector test? We said no. We were asked, would we? We said certainly we would. We would expect it to be fair, and we would expect the results to be public.
That's a lot of verbal diarrhea instead of a simple yes or no. A month later, the Washington Post reported on the Ramseys refusing to take a polygraph. A month after that, on May 25th, 2000, Boulder's Daily Camera finally published the results of the tests. The Ramseys said the tests proved they didn't kill their daughter. Beckner said the tests had no value. Ironically, there wasn't one polygraph test but 2. The result of the first was deemed inconclusive. The Ramseys' attorney, Lynn Wood, and several experts Wood brought forward to comment publicly on the results were asked by the media to explain the outcome of the first test. They couldn't. Chapter 2. The Last Photo and What It Means. I really wish we would stop playing games. Patsy Ramsey, May 25th, 2000. On April 13th, 2019, more than 23 years after JonBenet's murder, a brand new last photo was released to the media for the first time. Just as the polygraph concession coincided with a little give and take between the Ramseys and the media in 2000, it seems the last photo in 2019 was a gift in exchange for airplay as well. The not so good for the Ramseys settlement with CBS after the triumphant bluster that foreshadowed it, a $750 million lawsuit filed on behalf of Burke Ramsey, settled, was meant to be drowned out by a new and contrived deluge. A&E's hunting JonBenet's killer, and the new last photo achieved just that. What was so special about April 2019 that warranted John Ramsey stepping in front of the cameras and a poster-sized mock-up of the Ransom Note and the release of never-before-seen photos? Well, April 2019 was 3 months after the embarrassing settlement with CBS. There were no new clues in the phantasmal hunt for intruders. This was about reputation management and control of the narrative. But there are new and real clues lurking in the ether of the new last photo, unacknowledged, of course. One doesn't need to be a rocket scientist to connect the brown, black and white bow in the new last photo to the previously invisible or obscure or simply unseen material peeking out between blonde hairs and curled but lifeless little girl's hands. But one does require more than a passing knowledge of the unreleased discovery to know the significance of the bow. And one needs a relatively decent knowledge of the family dynamics to know, beyond the shallow forensic significance, the fact that it's there and what it means. So let's find out. We'll peel back 3 contextual layers one at a time, and in so doing expose a brand new breakthrough in this case. Worth playing for? Layer number 1. The first layer is the context of this image and its priority, given that the Ramsey case is the Mount Everest of high-profile criminal cases. Without doubt, the Ramsey case is the most famous American case, and arguably the most famous American case in the rest of the world. On the comprehensive but not necessarily accurate PB Works encyclopedia page on JonBenet Ramsey, a staggering 76 books are listed, approximately 23 documentaries have been released, and at least 3 movies. The number of articles in the mainstream media and appearances related to JonBenet Ramsey in broadcast media are too many to list, but are in the hundreds, respectively. As of September 2018, the Ramsey case file was said to exceed 60,000 pages. Compare that to the relatively trim 1,960 pages of the Chris Watts case. Now, within this context of countless books, documentaries, and news coverage, think about the effort it had to take to withhold the last photo of JonBenet Ramsey for 23 years. Not only is the last photo crucially important, it's basically the flag fluttering at the top of the Mount Everest case file. It's where JonBenet's story ends. And yet, instead of providing this image right in the beginning, other images have been used in the various books. The Ramseys have used images from Christmases past in their books, and John Douglas has used images of the Ramseys from as far back as the Christmas of 1994 in his book Law and Disorder. It's no exaggeration to say that this final image of JonBenet, not smiling, isolated, with no one else in the image but her, is perhaps the most important image in the entire archive. It's the equivalent of a summit photo of Mount Everest, missing from the expedition. It throws the entire expedition in doubt. Layer number 2. The second layer is the more obvious one. The release of the last photo shortly after the settlement to redirect indignation around the Ramseys to something else besides. That was Christmas Star. Christmas Star was published on Amazon on December 27th, 2019. The book is 97 pages long and is currently only available on Amazon Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. It's also currently ranked the #1 new release on Amazon's bestsellers in biographies of hoaxes and deceptions. It's one position ahead of another book I've written, Murder Most Foul, published on December 9th, 2019. So in terms of the backstory that surrounded the writing of Christmas Star, I originally planned to write Christmas Star at the end of 2019. The plan to write it came about, I guess, around about April 2019 when the new last photo was released. But then I kind of forgot about it. I got so sort of caught up in covering several other cases. I wrote a couple of books on the Chris Watts case. I wrote a pretty big book on a brand new case, the Patrick Frazee case. Also wrote a book on incels and the Nora Curran case, about the little girl who disappeared, who got lost in the jungles of Malaysia and ultimately died of starvation. So I sort of got caught up in those narratives, and then I just sort of felt like I wasn't going to be able to get round to Christmas Star, and I'd sort of made up my mind to put it over for the end of 2020. And then I kind of started noticing a blog post that I'd put on Crime Rocket, just gaining a lot of traction. It was consistently the most popular post on Crime Rocket. And the weird thing was, when I went back to look at the blog post, I'd actually thought that I'd written about the last photo, and I'd kind of dealt with it, and when I went back to the post that I'd written in April, I realized that while I was writing the post, it kind of occurred to me sort of how huge the implications were around the last photo. And I guess 3/4 through the post, I abandoned the idea of giving this information away in a blog post, and I thought I would do it in a book. But I'd forgotten that I'd made that decision. And so it was sort of towards the middle of December, approaching Christmas, that I thought, well, maybe I should just write an extended blog post, or basically complete the idea in that blog post in kind of a short book, that would have been, say, 5,000 to 10,000 words. So the whole idea was really just to write about the last photo and just provide the True Crime Rocket science analysis of that. And then I sort of got started, and as I got into it, as the Ramsey case typically does, it just became bigger and bigger, and that led to me, instead of writing a Kindlet, expanding the narrative from 10,000 to 20,000 words, and ultimately it was 25,000 words. In fact, there were quite a few chapters in there that I had to strip out just to keep it on the shorter side. It was originally, as I started setting out the narrative, it was looking like it was going to be, it become twice as long as it ultimately was. So I had to be quite strict to cut it down to size, back down to size, to the original sort of purpose of the book, which was to focus, kind of a laser-like focus, on the last photo. And that's what I think I did. In terms of the writing of the book, I'm not going to talk too much about the first chapter, other than that I just wanted to juxtapose the just one aspect of the Ramseys going on CNN right in the beginning in January the 1st, 1997, and then juxtapose that with them reappearing on CNN again for the first time. So it wasn't that they'd not done any interviews in the interim, but it was a case that they'd appeared on CNN, elected to talk to the authorities, and then when you saw them again, they were promoting a book. And I just kind of wanted to juxtapose that in a really strong way. And I also wanted to juxtapose the scenario around the polygraphs, how the polygraphs came about and how the polygraphs were ultimately presented in the media, to the ruse of the last photo, just the way that the last photo is just sort of thrown out there. And I don't think it was even really discussed in much detail in that documentary in April 2019. It was just sort of provided as a carrot for people to watch it. And I was also kind of intrigued and interested that despite putting it up on Crime Rocket, no one seemed to know what it meant. No one seemed to be really thinking about it. It didn't really make any headlines. And that's kind of the incredible thing, is how often things are in plain sight and people don't know how to think about it. So one thing that I did cover in the first two chapters that are kind of in the footnotes, which I haven't covered in the opening extract, but I just sort of dealt with the circumstances around where Barbara Walters asked the Ramseys if they would take the lie detector test. And I provided a link to that particular moment in the narrative. In chapter 2, which deals with the opening analysis of True Crime Rocket Science on the last photo, it deals with 3 layers. I kind of cut off the extract right after the beginning of the second layer. The chapter then presents a thesis, a hypothesis, and then the narrative sort of goes on to present some arguments and counter arguments in terms of the hypothesis. And then right at the end, in the sort of the final and penultimate chapters, the narrative circles back to the last photo and basically makes its sort of conclusion. So what we're going to do going forward is I'm going to be continuing audio extracts. So I'm basically going to be providing an audio version of Christmas Star on Patreon. It'll be under the $5 tier, which means you're basically getting the book at about a $1.50 discount for a month. And I'll be reading the book on Patreon and providing a bit of a backstory to each chapter. So if you're interested in that, head on to Patreon. It's at patreon.com/TCRS. On this channel, I'm about to start a brand new series on debunking the disappearance of Madeleine McCann documentary. So look out for that. If you want to be kept in the loop for the 10 episodes dealing with that TCRS debunk, then subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you found this episode interesting, please like, share amongst your networks. Perhaps WhatsApp to people who are interested in the JonBenet Ramsey case. You can share through the WhatsApp app, but also Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot. And then, otherwise, Christmas Star is available on Kindle. So is The Craven Silence, the first book in a trilogy of books that I wrote in 2016, co-wrote with Lisa Wilson. Those are quite well reviewed. And then there's a trilogy following that trilogy called The Day After Christmas. And both those trilogies systematically go through the timeline of the Ramsey case. And then for those interested in the Watts case, the 5th book in the series, in the two-phase series, Drilling Through Discovery, is available now in paperback, so you're welcome to pick that up. Thank you for listening.